Before we look at the questions, it's really important to read the instructions. So let's have a look at what was said at the end of 2022. So they start with, don't attempt to read the entire question paper. There will be a table of contents, and you need to mark off for yourself what you are going to be answering. So there are 4 sections with those 4 things in it, but there are 2 novels and 2 dramas that you could have studied. So you're going to choose whatever you have studied. So they emphasize this really strongly in point number 3. So if you've done a novel, there will be 2 questions, text A and B, on the novel. Same thing with the drama. If you've done short stories or poetry, there will be 2 stories and 2 poems. So if you've done My Children, My Africa and poetry, those are the sections that you answer. So there'll be a checklist, and the checklist will give you the pages. So you do not look at the whole paper. When you get that 10-minute reading time before your exam starts, find your questions so that you're comfortable with finding your way around the paper. Please read the instructions at the beginning of each section. Don't say to yourself, I know what they're going to say. Read it again. And then the numbering system. I see that the Western Cape's website says that students have a habit, if you're answering 1.3.1a, they say students are just writing A, or they're writing 1A, and the markers simply don't know where they're at. You must put it all down. So if we just go down here, so you've got the booklet, and the booklet is stapled in the middle. So the staples are down here, right? Here are your staples. And then they leave you white borders on each page. So when you are numbering, would you please go 1.3.1a, 1.3.2b. They want it like that. Don't write in the margins. The margins are for the markers and for the department and whatever. You cannot write in the margins. Please don't write below the lines on a page either. Please, please, don't cram things in. But please write out the number in full. And they also would like, I see the Western Cape says, please won't you go question 1, section A or whatever. They want you to make it very clear for the marker. So the whole idea is make it easy for the marker and easy for yourself. Start each section on a new page. That's because there are different markers for the different set works. So help the marker find your questions. Watch your time management. It suggests 75 minutes. And write neatly and legibly. So leave lines open between answers. You've written here, you want to write the next one, 1.3.1b. Leave a nice line open so the markers don't battle to read what you have to say. Now, this paper means that you have studied. Look what it says. It says on a novel you have studied. So you cannot just have a basic knowledge of the texts. Whichever texts you have studied, you have to know that content really, really, really well. So if they ask you who, what, why, when, where, you actually have answers to those questions. If they say identify the speaker or the setting, you must be able to do it. If they say state 2 reasons that somebody didn't want to do something, you have to know those reasons. If they say describe what the character is about to do, you've got to know that as well. Remember that 40% of the marks are level 1 and level 2 questions, which are lower order questions. You cannot throw away those marks. Then 40% of the marks are level 3. And that's when you have to infer. You have to say, this is what I'm told, and this is what I can conclude from what I'm told. Again, it's 40% of the marks. If you do not know what's going on, you cannot discuss. If I say, why do characters behave the way they do? You won't be able to answer those questions, and you will be throwing away your marks. Then level 4 and 5 is the more detailed use of language, attitudes, and so on. So you've got to be able to answer them. The themes questions, these are your level 4 and 5's questions. You've got to know your texts really, really, really well. And the other thing, while I'm hammering this point, is when you're asked something and then you're told, substantiate your answer. There are too many candidates who think, I'm substantiating it from my general knowledge. No, this is a literature paper. You are substantiating it from the text. You are giving me reasons. You are explaining your opinions from the texts. You have to know the texts really, really, really well. So I've talked about the importance of numbering and reading all the instructions. Let's look at the first question. Now, your paper is set out novel, drama, short stories, poetry. But in the novel section, there are 2 novels, and you will not have done both of them. So the first novel is Cry the Beloved Country. That's the one that they put in. So they say extract A, and they give you some idea of what's happening. So they give you some help with that. Then they give you the text. And you need to know more than book 1, chapter 5. You need to know what's just happened, what's going to happen. Then let's look at typical questions that they ask. You will see that the examiners set the same kind of question across all the set works. Now, I know that there are some teachers who feel that each set work requires its own kind of question, and that the questions should be different on each of the set works. But candidates have felt in the past, hang on a second, I did My Children, My Africa, but the questions on that were so much more difficult than the questions on Cry the Beloved Country. It's not fair. So I actually like the way the examiners are doing it. So if you look at this question here, there's a column A and a column B. There are characters in column A and something about who they are or what they do or their job in column B. And you're asked to match the columns. Notice they want only the letter A to E and then the A, B, C, D, E from the other side. So they just want the answer. So you're going to go 1.1.1 A. So Arthur Jarvis, he was an engineer. B. Then you're going to go 1.1.1 B. Matthew Khumalo, he was a burglar. I suppose C and D would be okay, but you're going to just put that down. So you'll find this question, but notice you really need to know your book quite well. These are major characters, but sometimes you don't get major characters. Wait till you have a look at this question in My Children, My Africa. So it's not quite as simple when there are fewer characters or they feel they've asked the same thing. Right. Let's look at the next one. This is a describe question. Describe how. So all you've got to do is tell me the story. You're telling me about the character. How does he display? What does he do to show that he's caring towards Stephen while Stephen's in Johannesburg? Do you see what I mean about knowing your text really well? But just tell me the story. You've got 2 marks. You might want to go 1.1.2 bullet. Msimangu does this, this, and this, which shows that he cares. And he also says this or does that or organizes the following for Stephen. So you might want to bullet it to get those 2 points very clear in your mind. Now we come to a question that you're going to see over and over and over again, which is a tone question. So remember, this is not the question. This is the preparation for the question. But go to line 12 and then say to yourself, what tone? So when I'm doing tone, this is how I teach tone. I say, there is my person. These are the words that are coming out of his mouth. And the tone is what feeling you would hear in his voice. So it's a feeling question. Now, what I want you to do is, at the moment, the markers are looking for an adjective. So I want you to answer this in something like, he would use an irritated tone. Might not be the right answer for this question. I'm just giving you an example. He would use a concerned tone. I want you to write your answer in that way, because what candidates are doing is they're writing, saying something like, it would be anger. And that isn't necessarily getting you to tone. Yes, anger is tone, but they often, when they don't answer it with the word tone afterwards, they often don't get a proper feeling here. So I'm just saying to you, to help you get a feeling, write an irritated tone, an angry tone. And in that way, you would get a better answer. That's what I'm looking for. But you go back to the lines and you say to yourself, what would the feeling be? And remember, you are providing one word for the tone, an angry tone. It's 1 mark. You are not describing the tone, you're saying an angry tone. Now look at the second part of the question. This is how it's usually set out. Why? Now the advice from my HOD is to begin with Msimangu, so we're telling you who we're talking about, would use an, let's say we're saying angry, an angry tone because. Now what she has found is that students are not linking the B part of the question to the A part. So they say an irritated tone and then say Msimangu would be concerned. She says they're not seeing the link. So to make sure that you focus yourself, you say Msimangu would use an irritated tone. Msimangu would use an irritated tone because, or he would be irritated because. So you're going to repeat this word in some way here to make sure that you keep the focus. He would be frustrated because. He would use a demanding tone, or he would be demanding because, so that you keep your focus. And use the same technique if you get the word mood. So say it would be a frustrated mood. Use the word plus the word mood after it. Right, so it's really important. You will see the tone questions, and I will look at some of them in more detail, but you've got to get the way that you answer these questions more accurate so that you are assured that you're doing what the examiner wants you to do. Now, we've talked about irony many times, but I'm going to do it again. So, what is irony? Irony is when somebody, so let's put the person, the writer or the reader or something, expects something, and I'm going to call it X, or hopes something, or believes something, or trusts something, or dreams something, but yet, why is the reality? Please, I want you to use this kind of pattern when you are answering an irony question. So you say Gertrude's reason, her reason is X, but Y actually happens. So you've got to do the expectation, but. So you might like to say something like, the expectation is that Gertrude will find her husband, but she never finds him and instead finds many men to replace her husband. Or you can say the expectation that is created is X, yet the reality is Y. If you do not show the contrast in this question, you get naught. So if you look at a memo, it says give the candidate two or nothing. You cannot say Gertrude's reason for going to Johannesburg is that her husband went to work on the mines and he never came home. You get naught. So you have to say the expectation when she goes to Johannesburg is that she will find her husband, or Gertrude hopes that she will find her husband, or Gertrude and Stephen believe that she's going to find her husband, but she never finds him and she herself finds many husbands. So I want the word, where's my red pen? I want the word but or the word yet. I need to see it, because what are you doing? You are showing the marker. I have seen the contrast. The contrast is there. I've seen it. I'm showing it to you. And so we're going to use a word like expect or expectation. So the irony question you'll see in every single set work. Now this is one of the questions that I said it's really important that you know the book really well. First of all, what does this extract reveal or show about a character? Now be careful. You might know a lot of things about Gertrude's character. Let's say she's A, B, C, and D. And you know D really well. So you explain D, but D isn't in this extract. So please, you must go back to the extract. Now you've studied this. This is what you've learnt. This is what you discussed in class. These are the ideas you got from your study group. But you've got to say which of the ideas about Gertrude which of those ideas is seen in this extract. Now, the government would like you to use PEE or PEA. So if you're doing home language, it's PEAL. Point, evidence, explain, link. Point, evidence, analyze, link. So for first additional language, there's been a general consensus, a group idea, that we can let the L side go. But if you use this formula, you will find that your answers will be so much better structured, and you will get your marks. So you're going to make a point about Gertrude's character. So you want to say that Gertrude is, let's say, easily influenced. She's tempted very easily. She cannot resist temptation, something like that. Then your evidence from the extract here, and you can say something like, we see this when. Remember, the evidence is not quoted. It is in your own words. We see this when whatever happens, all right? Or it is shown when. Or this is shown when. Then your analysis, you can say, this shows us, this shows the reader that whatever. This makes me understand. This makes the reader understand. If you use a formula like this, you will find that your answers are better structured and you will do a whole lot better in your examination. I'll be talking more about that as we go on. Now we come to the theme question. Every single set work will have a theme question. It's a discuss question. It will be for 3 marks. So what you get in the theme question, and this is true if you are studying the poetry or anything else, you will get a statement. So it will say one of the themes of My Children, My Africa, one of the themes of this poem. And then you have the discuss question. Start by saying to yourself, why is that theme identified? That whatever it is happens often enough in the story to become a theme. So there's enough pain and suffering in Cry the Beloved Country for the examiner to say, you know what, that's a theme of this novel. How do you tackle this question? First of all, what do you not do? Do not just tell the story. You cannot just say, this person has pain, that person suffers. Say something like, we see, and then whatever theme you've got for Macbeth or the short story, A Bag of Sweets, when now we can have your story, X happens. There's my story. I'm not throwing out the story. And then what you have to do is to show me the link between whatever it is that you've taken from the story and show me the link to the theme. So really, we're looking at 3 examples because there are 3 marks, right? So you're going to give me an example plus the link 3 times over. I would bullet this answer so that you can see what you are doing. So you're going to say, we see pain and suffering when whatever happens. And then you're going to say, and this person suffers because, or the suffering is mental or physical or emotional or whatever. So in other words, we're going to have the theme, plus the story, plus the link. Then you're going to do it all over again. There is suffering also when whatever happens, full stop, and then you explain. This person is suffering in this way, or Africa is suffering because the land is eroding and the people cannot survive on the land anymore. And then you do it all over again a third time. So please, what we're starting to see is candidates are going, there's this theme, then they go example, 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 and they want 3 marks. It's not going to happen. So it's got to be, there's the theme, fine, but I want theme plus example plus link. Theme plus example plus link. Theme plus example plus link. Every single time. So please, it's very important. Don't just tell the story. And we have this question, and I want you to use the PEA method again here. Do you have sympathy? Remember, you've got to begin with yes or no. So, yes, I have sympathy for Stephen Khumalo. Point. Then, sorry, full stop. Then, now you're going to make your point. Stephen suffers a great deal. Example, Absalom. You explain about Absalom and the suffering. So you're going to give me the point, the explanation, and the analysis. So you can use an E there for explanation or analysis. This is your evidence. And you're going to do that for your 3 marks. If you're going to say no, well, I don't know how you wouldn't sympathize with Stephen. You can say yes and no. But again, you go yes, then make your point, evidence, explain. And if you're going to add no, then you're going to say add no, point, evidence, explain. You're going to do it all twice. There are students who do not seem to realize that there are 2 extracts, A and B, or C and D, or E and F. You've got to do both. Students do just one section of the question. No, 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 no. Here they receive the news. It tells you which book and chapter. Now, setting. A lot of candidates simply say, this is book 3, chapter 3. No. With setting, there are 2 marks. You've got to do time and place. When and where. With the when, tell me what has just happened. Don't go right back to the beginning. So don't, if we look at this extract, don't say Stephen went to Johannesburg. No, you need to say a letter has just arrived telling Stephen of the date of his son's hanging. And where are they? They are in Stephen Khumalo's house. So where and when? Macbeth has just spoken to the witches and he's now about to discuss something with Banquo. Right, so it's where and when. I cannot tell you how many people lose marks there because they only do the where. Explain why. This is just an understanding of the text. There are 2 marks. He doesn't see anything. He doesn't hear anything. Why not? You're going to say he is incredibly shocked and then tell me why he is shocked or traumatized. Now we have a state of mind question. They will refer you to lines. You go back to the lines. State of mind is how is she feeling? You start with Mrs. Khumalo is. And you don't say something like she feels confused. Say she is confused. And then why? Substantiate your answer. Remember, refer to those lines. We have a multiple choice question. This just tests your knowledge of the book. And remember, you go 1.2.4 and then you choose A, B, C, or D. And if you decide it's B, you just do it like that. At this point in the novel, tells you I've got to deal with it right then. Why? This is an understanding. State 2 points. It means you need to understand what she's trying to achieve. It actually isn't stated in the passage. It means you've got to understand her relationship with Stephen, and what she wants to do for her husband here. Now we come to the figure of speech question. So you're expecting this in the poetry, but you need to expect it also in the other texts. So identify the figure of speech. I have said before that they do not mark spelling if they can work it out. But let me tell you that if it is a simile and you write smile instead of simile, you will get naught. Remember, a simile is I smile. It's a smile with an I smile. So you must get that correct. So identify the figure of speech. You're going to say this is a metaphor or a simile or personification or whatever it is. So please revise your figures of speech. Then explain why. Now, for some reason, the examiners have chosen the word relevant, but they actually mean effective. And I know that there was a discussion with some of the markers, and the markers are saying, or at least some of the people are saying, that relevant and effective is the same thing. It's not. But what you've got to understand is they don't mean relevant, they mean effective. So why is it effective? So I use IDE. When we discuss figures of speech, we use IDE. I, identify. D, describe. E, explain. So let us say you've got a metaphor. You would go explain why it's in this metaphor. I would keep that so that I remember it's a metaphor. I would then say X is described as Y, because you know in a simile something is compared to something. You tell me in a metaphor X is described as Y. Right. And then you tell me about Y, and then you go back and link it to X. So if we say that your face is in a mold of suffering, you would say that the expression on Stephen's face looks as if it has been made by a mold. And then you'd explain that a mold controls the substance that's in it, it forms it in a particular way, and in the same way, suffering is controlling Stephen's expressions, is making him look in a particular way. So when you get the figure of speech question, and you must expect it not just in the poetry question, expect it in all the set works. You're going to say, identify the figure of speech. This is a whatever it is, it's a metaphor. And then you'd say that a mold shapes whatever's inside it in the same way suffering is shaping his expression. It shows what pain he's in, whatever it is. Okay, 2 marks. We get the question about why is something false. You need to tell me what the truth is. Don't just say it's false because in his final letter he doesn't include money. Where does the money come? Or does he never give money at all? Well, he does give money, but not in a letter. So you need to tell me what is the truth, what is the fact. This is simply story. You know your story, you're going to get 40% of the marks. This is a discuss question. Once again, you're going to use the PEE or the PEA. You're going to use your P. The novel ends on a hopeful note. You can say something about the novel does end hopefully because there's hope for the future, something like that. Then your evidence, what is the hope for the future? And then your discussion about this is what happens in the story, and this is why it shows me that there is hope for the future, whatever else it is that you are dealing with. You can say yes or no. Remember to say yes, it ends on a hopeful note, or no, it doesn't end on a hopeful note. And then PEA, point, evidence, explanation, and analysis. So what you've seen in what we've looked at with Cry the Beloved Country is I've tried to look at the type of questions. And as we go on, we're going to look at that again. What questions are repeated throughout the paper? So even if you weren't studying Cry the Beloved Country, what you should have by now is a really good idea of the kinds of questions that you are going to see in the set works that you have studied.